CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Juliet Mann.
And I'm Li Jianhua. Our top stories. Financial protection and tax incentives for foreign companies in China as Beijing lays out plans to strengthen intellectual property rights and attract investment.
All eyes are on the UK inflation and other key data this week as investors look to see whether the Bank of England's tight monetary policy is finally working.
Donald Trump could be facing his fourth indictment of the year, this time in Georgia, over accusations he tried to overturn the 2020 election results.
My 9-year-old couldn't. She just kept telling me, Mom, I can't. Please, Mom.
The harrowing story of one family's escape from wildfires in Hawaii, where at least 96 people are dead and hundreds are unaccounted for. China says it will offer financial protection and tax incentives for foreign companies operating in the country.
That's included in a 24-part plan that also promises to strengthen intellectual property rights in a move to attract greater foreign investment. CGTN's correspondent Sun Tianyuan reports.
The State Council, or China's cabinet, issued 24 new guidelines on Sunday to optimize the business climate for foreign enterprises and investors. Authorities say the policy document shows China's determination to press ahead with reform and opening up with concrete measures.
We hope investors and foreign invested enterprises from various countries can fully feel that these measures demonstrate the Chinese government's unwavering determination to further opening up. We also hope they can fully enjoy the benefits brought by the implementation of policies achieving common development with the Chinese economy.
The Sunday document aims to attract more foreign capital while promoting equal rights and further protecting the interests of multinational corporations and investors. Chinese authorities also promise stronger fiscal support and tax incentives. Despite downward pressure and global challenges, China remains a popular destination for foreign capital. In the first half of 2023, China had over 23,000 additional foreign enterprises, an increase of 35.7%. An official says foreign enterprises have maintained confidence in the Chinese market, especially in the high-tech manufacturing sector.
The actual use of foreign investment in high-tech manufacturing increased by 28.8% in the first half of this year. This indicates that foreign enterprises have sufficient confidence in investing in China. The great potential in China's manufacturing industry will also bring sustained profit opportunities for foreign enterprises.
Authorities say they will accelerate the implementation of the guidelines and continue to foster a better business environment for foreign investors and enterprises. Sun Tianyuan, CGTN, Beijing.
The stocks in Asia, Europe and America all fell in early trading as investors mulled US consumer spending, concerns over China's property sector and surprise election results in Argentina. Here in the UK, inflation's in focus, with unemployment and wages data also out later this week. Susanna Streeter is Senior Investment and Markets Analyst at Hargreaves Lansdown. Great to have you on Global Business Europe again, Susanna. Now, there's lots to talk about, but let's start in the UK, where it's a big week for data. What might change the outlook for the economy?
It certainly is a big week for data, and of course it comes after we had that better than expected reading for UK growth that came in marginally higher than expected from April to June, growing 0.2%, better than the 0.1% expected. Now, of course, the focus turns to the inflation reading out on Wednesday, and the hope is, the expectation is, that it will continue to show that the rate of price increases is falling back. But the problem is this could be a bumpy journey ahead, because even though we are expecting inflation to have fallen in July to around 6.8%. Of course, that's well above the bank's target, and there could be yet another upwards rise in September. So we're looking at this kind of bumpy descent, and this is why the Bank of England is still largely expected to still increase interest rates when the Monetary Policy Committee meets again in September.
Now, you're talking about bumpy journeys, so let's look at what's moving financial markets, because there have been some wobbles in Argentina after that unexpectedly right-wing election result. Yes, there certainly have. And the Argentine government has now devalued its currency by almost 18%. And the benchmark interest rate is actually going to be hiked 21 percentage points to 118%. It really does outline the scale of the crisis in Argentina, which has been exacerbated now by this shock result with Congressman Javier Milei, a far-right libertarian, actually winning the primary election. Still, the outcome is uncertain when we reach the presidential elections, but it's certainly thrown the country into fresh disarray. Well, those numbers you just threw out there are really astonishing. 118% interest rates, 18% devaluation of the peso. But while we're talking about currencies, how about talking about the ruble in Russia? What's going on there? Yes, so again, we're going to have this kind of emergency meeting by Russia's central bank after the ruble fell to its weakest point in almost 17 months. It has again been a pretty volatile ride for the ruble, of course, plunging dramatically after Russia invaded Ukraine, but then regaining form. However, as those sanctions have hit hard, and actually there was an exodus of cash out of the country following that of Wagner uprising, that short-lived one, that added to the ruble's weakness. And now there is speculation that interest rates will be hiked to try and lift the ruble out of where it is right now. So really going past the psychologically important level of 100 to the dollar earlier today, which is why the central bank, I think, is stepping in to potentially take action. And, of course, somewhere else that everybody's always watching to gauge the mood of where the global economy is going is China. Now, we've already heard in the programme how they're looking to increase foreign direct investment, trying to level the playing field for outside investors. But the concerns perhaps from investors about maybe a more subdued than expected economic recovery. Absolutely, and right now concerns are centred around the property sector because we're seeing that new bank loans have tumbled in July and other key credit gauges have also weakened, and that was even after policymakers cut interest rates and promised to roll out a lot more support for the economy. You talked there, Juliet, about that support to try and encourage inward investment. But there is still real concern about the fragile property sector. One of the biggest property firms defaulting on some of its debt repayments. And so really that's been the focus. That's affecting, say, the FTSE 100 today, with mining stocks falling back amid expectations of lower demand for metals if the Chinese economy slows down. And of course, I remember there's a flash showing last month that actually China had entered a deflation scenario. Now, we don't know how long this will continue for, but certainly there is other data out later this week, retail sales, industrial production. That data will be very closely watched to try and get a bit more of a handle on just how fast the Chinese economy is slowing. Susanna Streeter, always great to get your insight. Thank you. Susanna Streeter from Hargreaves Lansdown. Thank you.
Well, shares in Chinese developer Country Garden have slumped to a record low after the company suspended trading in at least 10 of its mainland bonds, spurring a wider sell-off in property-linked stocks. The company, which used to be the largest developer in China by sales, missed international bond payments last week in a sign that a two-year liquidity crisis across the real estate sector is threatening to escalate.
Shares in skincare firm L'Occitane International have jumped on the news its chairman's considering taking it private. The company's controlling shareholder, Reinhold Geiger, is eyeing up a deal for the shares he currently doesn't own. The Austrian billionaire controls almost three-quarters of the firm's shares.
The world's largest contract electronics maker, Foxconn, has beaten forecasts, reporting $1 billion in earnings for the second quarter, buoyed by a boom in the artificial intelligence sector. But the Apple supplier remains cautious about its future outlook as it joins other tech ventures grappling with a weak global economy and a sluggish recovery in China.
Australia's national carrier Qantas has unveiled new livery in support of the Indigenous referendum. Australians will cast their vote in the landmark referendum later this year about altering the constitution to recognise the Indigenous population and establish a parliamentary advisory body. Several of the Qantas fleet will carry a Yes 23 logo, asking Australians to vote yes in the referendum.
US electric vehicle maker Tesla has cut prices in China for some of its Model Y versions. The company slashed the entry price of its long-range and performance models by more than $1,900. Analysts say it's not clear if the move will trigger a new price war in the sector. Tesla's car sent its stock down nearly 3% in early US trading.
Okay, we're staying with electric vehicles, and Chinese EV maker BYD continues to dominate the world's largest auto market. In the first half of the year, outpacing its rival Tesla in China. Now, in EV sales, I think those were outpaced by 29%.
And the CGTN's correspondent Huang Fei visited BYD's Shenzhen headquarters to find out what's driving the growth.
China's EV makers are extending their lead at home and are set to outsell foreign auto giants this year for the first time. Now, Chinese brands are starting to show some teeth in international markets as well. BYD exported a record 18,000 new energy vehicles in July, with Southeast Asia and Europe among their fastest-growing markets.
Based on the feedback from customers and the markets, I believe we won by the power of the product. By that, I mean core technologies, including the world-leading blade battery and other breakthroughs. With safety as a foundation, we've been able to add smart features and services, creating products with unique advantages.
This is BYD's main export model called the Atto 3. The company says it's been the best-selling model in countries like New Zealand, Thailand, Singapore, Israel, and Sweden. More than 700 units of this compact electric crossover were sold in the Scandinavian country last month, snatching the top spot from American rival Tesla for the first time.
There's a strong demand for technologically advanced and affordable EVs made in China, both in emerging and mature markets. And crucially, lower cost doesn't mean lower quality. These cars are technologically advanced, as I said. They're powered by the blade battery and capable of traveling 420 kilometers on one single charge and have received top safety ratings by European regulators.
Chinese EVs are also winning on the economies of scale. The country produces most of the world's new generation batteries, the main cost of an electric car. A firm grip on the supply chain means Chinese manufacturers can compete on price and technology for the average budget.
In overall cost control, we have a comparative advantage. 20 years ago, we started mapping out all the key points on the NEV supply chain, from upstream suppliers to our stores. The rapid growth in the last 2 to 3 years is actually a result of a 2-decade effort.
For smaller Chinese brands, cutthroat price competition and weak consumer sentiments at home is making an overseas pivot necessary. Southeast Asia is a hotly contested arena with strong government support and increasing purchasing power. But it's a tougher ride to Europe due to increasing pushback against Chinese imports.
Anti-China rhetoric will have an impact, but European cars entering other markets will face the same protectionist debate. The key question is, are you a responsible exporter? Nowadays, China isn't just selling the most affordable finished cars. Chinese firms are building entire supply chains overseas, setting up local factories, R&D centers, sales networks, and the rest of the ecosystem. This is creating jobs and tax revenues for the countries they enter.
Chinese firms invested $24 billion into the EV ecosystem in Europe last year. Europe's low tariffs and a mandate to end the sales of new combustion engines in 2035 present huge opportunities for Chinese companies. But how far west they can move will be determined by much more than the power of these wheels.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Niger's ousted president to be charged with treason as coup leaders resist international pressure to give up power.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. Former US President Donald Trump is set to find out this week if he will face his fourth indictment of the year for his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election results.
The stage is set in Georgia, where the Fulton County District Attorney has signalled that charges in her years-long investigation are imminent. But despite his legal woes, Trump remains the front-runner for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. He says all the investigations against him are part of a coordinated effort by Democrats to undermine his candidacy.
Now let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. John, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times for Trump, and it's a tale of two Trumps seen this weekend.
I like this quoting of Charles Dickens. You know, I was born in Portsmouth, and I think Charles Dickens was born in Portsmouth as well, so I know his work quite well. Good on you, Chenhua and Juliet. Look, we've seen scenes we haven't seen before here in American political life. It's been extraordinary over the weekend, literally two visions of President Trump, okay? So he is still the front runner by far in the race to be the Republican nomination in next year's presidential election, well ahead of his rival, the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis. So because of that, they all had to turn up in Iowa, in the Midwest of the country this weekend, to the state fair there to schmooze the Iowa voters ahead of their caucuses, which are slated for the early part of 2024. So Trump turns up, okay, brings with him loads of low-level politicians from Florida just to have a dig at Ron DeSantis, who, remember, is the governor of that state, and he's his number two rival, right behind, a long way behind President Trump, as I said. And, of course, President Trump is mobbed by fans and supporters who turned up, and I think you saw those pictures just now. So that's going on up on the Canadian border, basically, in the state of Iowa. Thousands of miles to the south, in Georgia, the south of the country, a very, very different story this weekend was unfolding about the former president. Because down there, it was being reported widely that the prosecutors in the case against him regarding subverting the election have got evidence that the Trump team tried to get access to one of the voting machines in a rural county in Georgia to try and get the information and the data out and then deal with it. And also, the Fulton County District Attorney is preparing over the weekend to bring subversion of the election charges against President Trump sometime this week. That's in Fulton County, which is in the north-central part of the state of Georgia, and includes Atlanta, which is the capital city of Georgia. So now we know that security is being stepped up around the courthouse, and it is our understanding that a grand jury is being briefed on everything I've just said pretty much regarding the case by the district attorney right now. Guys?
Well, John, what do we know about the details of this legal challenge against Trump?
The Fulton County District Attorney is called Fani Willis, okay, and it is widely reported here that she's looking to come up with 12 charges against, my understanding is 12 members of the Trump team, including former President Trump himself. And the charges, I've said, election subversion, stemming back to that period in the run-up after the election and before January the 6th. Now, the charges that they're looking at bringing have an incredible title. They're called Racketeer, Influence and Corrupt Organization Act. Now, this is a Georgia act, which is much more wide-ranging than the federal alternative out of Washington, D.C., but to me it sounds something like the mob or the mafia. Now, we know that the grand jury is meeting now, or we think we do, because remember, these things are done in secret. We think we do because the former lieutenant governor, or lieutenant governor, as the Americans call him, of the state of Georgia, Jeffrey Duncan, said that he was being deposed on Tuesday, tomorrow, okay? Now, we know that Fani Willis takes about 2 days always to lay out her cases, and there are 2 grand juries down there in Atlanta. One meets on Monday and Tuesday, the other one meets on Thursday and Friday, so we assume this is the one that Fani Willis is dealing with, and that therefore, based on everything I've just said, we will get some kind of indictment either tomorrow, Tuesday evening, Atlanta time, or on Wednesday. If that happens, I don't think we'll see President Trump in court until the end of the week, but the anticipation is that the indictments are being handed down quite soon. That will bring to 4 the criminal indictments against the former president. And, of course, the others are in New York, in Florida, and Washington, D.C. As for President Trump, well, he's now left Iowa, but he has been speaking on his social media site, Truth Social. Remember, he so far eschewed Twitter or X and remains entirely on Truth Social. And of that telephone call that he made, which is the central plank of the evidence against him here, where he asked for 11,780 more votes, one more than we have, of that telephone call, he's still saying on Truth Social, it was a perfect call.
Thanks, John. That is our correspondent, John Terrett, in New York.
Niger's coup leaders have announced plans to prosecute deposed President Mohamed Bazoum for high treason and undermining national security.
President Bazoum has been under house arrest since the military leaders staged a coup 3 weeks ago. They are continuing to resist international pressure to give up power. The Western African regional bloc, ECOWAS, has threatened military action to restore civilian rule, but it has so far failed to follow through.
Let's talk to our correspondent, Deji Badamosi, who's in Lagos, in neighbouring Nigeria. Deji, what more do we know about the conditions of the president's house arrest and his health?
Well, talking about his health now, we know that on Saturday his doctor actually met with him, and well, the story that came out of that is that the doctor said he's okay, he's doing fine, but we've also had reports about his son being critically ill. But after that visit by the doctor, we've not had anything at all, other than this latest statement now from the junta saying that he would be prosecuted for what it calls high treason. So to this point, nobody has heard from him, and just as he said the last time he sent a message out, he's been denied access to his family members and people around him. But you know, the good thing is that his doctor said he was able to see him on Saturday and that he was fine.
Deji, Niger's military is now willing to talk to regional leaders from ECOWAS. Have I got that right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, they've come out now to say they're willing to talk with ECOWAS and that they're open to negotiation. Of course, that actually happened after a delegation of religious leaders now from Nigeria met with the junta there, met with the Prime Minister now, and even the general himself who is taking over power there. So they say they're now open to discuss with ECOWAS, and we do know that the African Union, of course, is holding a meeting today. That's the Peace and Security Committee of the African Union. They're holding a meeting to get updates on what the situation is in that country, and then they'll decide the next step. So we expect that in the coming days, ECOWAS will be sending another delegation now to Niger to negotiate with the junta, now that they've said they're open to negotiating or talking with ECOWAS.
Deji Badamosi in Lagos, thank you very much for the update. The search continues for hundreds of people still missing on the Hawaiian island of Maui, days after wildfires left at least 96 people dead.
Much of the historic resort town of Lahaina has been destroyed in what's become the deadliest wildfire in U.S. modern history. Firefighters, assisted by members of the U.S. National Guard, are still battling flare-ups, while rescue teams comb through the town's charred ruins in search of victims. The state governor has warned the death toll is likely to rise.
Anger's growing among Lahaina's residents over why authorities didn't issue any warnings. Our correspondent, Itza Soledad Perez, reports from Maui.
The wildfire's death toll continues to rise here in Hawaii. Only 2 bodies have been identified at this time. Now, canine teams are searching for cadavers, and they started working only on Saturday. So far, only 3% of the impacted area has been searched. That's why officials are saying that they expect to find more bodies. Now, firefighters are still extinguishing flare-ups in Lahaina and other parts of West Maui. Access is still restricted to residents, and they continue to feel frustrated. They want to go back to their hometown. Hawaii Governor Josh Green and the FEMA director surveyed all the area that was destroyed by the fires. Now, I had the opportunity to talk to the Maui County mayor and ask him what I continue to hear from the residents, why they were not warned. They say they didn't hear any fire alarms, they didn't get any text messages. So I posed a question to him. This was his answer.
Generally speaking, we do not have sirens for fires.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody in any other state does. The sirens tell you to go in and turn on your television and listen to the news reports. It's usually for tsunami warnings and hurricanes. We don't want people, if there's a fire, going back into their home and turning on their TV. We'd rather they take evasive action. So I think there's a lot of talk about people maybe misunderstanding the purpose.
And that explanation is definitely not enough for the people that lost loved ones, all their belongings, their home. Meanwhile, in other parts of Maui, life is continuing with very, very little interruption. It feels that West Maui is an island unto itself. Itza Soledad Perez, CGTN, Maui.
Well, Akanese Var is a survivor of the Maui wildfires. Her husband and 3 children were forced to flee on foot after their car got stuck in traffic just meters from the flames.
It went from blue skies to gray to black. And all we seen was embers from fire that we had no idea what's going on. There was no siren, nothing. And it was just heartbreaking seeing our community, my neighbors, like lots of elderly people trying to make it down the stairs just to get into their car. Everything's coming so quick. We could feel the heat. It's sitting in our car. And out of nowhere, I just hear banging on this window. And everything's dark, so I look to my left, and I'm literally right next to this car where this grandmother is yelling for help. And she's just telling me, please help me, I have a baby. And I just, at that time, I'm like, what do I do? So, of course, I jump out. I tell my husband, you tend to the grandma. I'm grabbing the baby. I run out. I run around her car, open up the back. The baby's on her side. Right behind her. I reached over. I grabbed this baby. She was about 2.5, 3 years old. I grabbed her. She was sitting on a blanket. I wrapped her with the blanket, and I told my kids, you guys run. Don't turn around and look for me. And my 9-year-old couldn't. She just kept telling me, Mom, I can't. Please, Mom.
So I ran this way. Baby was behind her. I didn't know that. Pulled her over. This is where we ran. In the dark, not being able to see anything. This wall here is the only thing that was keeping us from burning.
At least 21 people are dead and dozens are missing after a landslide in India's northern Himalayas. Worshippers were attending a pilgrimage in the state of Himachal Pradesh. Rescue operations underway to account for at least 20 missing people. Heavy rains and melting glaciers have brought deadly flash floods to the mountainous region in neighbouring Pakistan and Nepal over the past 2 years.
A tornado in eastern China's Jiangsu province has killed 2 people and injured 15 others. The wounded have been taken to hospital and affected residents have been relocated. The tornado also damaged the farm buildings and greenhouses in the region. Rescue and relief efforts are underway.
Japan is bracing for the 7th tropical storm of the season, with flight and railway cancellations ahead of Typhoon Lan making landfall on Tuesday. The country's meteorological agency says the storm's heading northwest from the Pacific Ocean, with wind gusts of up to 195 kilometres per hour. Heavy rain and wind is expected to hit the coast of Wakayama Prefecture before moving on to the major population centres of Osaka and Kyoto.
You can get headlines from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN Storyboard email newsletter. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead.
Homelessness in London. I'll have more on why families are increasingly getting stuck in budget hotels to provide emergency accommodation.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Lee Jean-Hua and me, Juliette Mann. The headlines again. Financial protection and tax incentives for foreign companies in China. Beijing lays out plans to strengthen intellectual property rights and attract investment.
And Donald Trump could be facing his 4th indictment of the year, this time in Georgia, over accusations he tried to overturn the 2020 election results.
More drone and missile attacks have hit the Ukrainian city of Odessa, which injured at least 3 people.
A supermarket was also damaged by debris from falling missiles. The Black Sea port city has been repeatedly attacked since Russia withdrew from a UN-brokered grain deal last month.
Ukrainian officials in Kherson have declared a day of mourning after 7 people, including a newborn baby, were killed in Russian shelling on Sunday. More than 20 others were injured in the attack. It came a day after Moscow accused Kyiv of terrorism over a missile strike on the Crimean bridge, which links the peninsula to Russia.
The Russian ruble fell to a 16-month low against the dollar earlier on Monday. Let's speak to our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in the capital, Moscow. Dasha, Russia's central bank will hold an extraordinary meeting on interest rates on Tuesday. What do we know?
Well, that's right. As we have seen, the Russian ruble has sank to its lowest since the start of the so-called special military operation in Ukraine back in March and February 2022. The ruble has been floating at around 130 against the US dollar on Moscow Stock Exchange. Today, we have seen the benchmark of 101 ruble being exceeded by the US dollar against the Russian ruble. So certainly that's the weakest for the Russian currency. That has been believed in Russia that the authorities will not allow the ruble to go weaker. We have heard from the Russian presidential advisor Maxim Oreshkin saying that the ruble has been that weak because of the loose monetary policy. He was also saying that the Russian economy needs a strong ruble, and he said, quote, that the weak currency complicates economic restructuring and negatively affects people's real income. So we understand that the Russian central bank will be holding an emergency meeting tomorrow, and the exchange rate on the Moscow Stock Exchange after this announcement has started to stabilize. So the expectation is that the authorities will step in to control the Russian currency against this weakening.
Well, Dasha, Ukraine has condemned what it calls the provocative Russian actions in the Black Sea. So what does the Kremlin say about this move?
Well, the Russian understanding is very straightforward. Russia says the Palau-flagged vessel in the Black Sea was heading towards the port of Izmail in Ukraine. And Russia has been firing the warning shots to stop this vessel for the inspection, because earlier the Russian Minister of Defense has said that it was withdrawing the security guarantees for the humanitarian corridor in the Black Sea after Russia's decision not to extend the Black Sea grain deal beyond the 17th of July, saying that all the vessels heading towards the Ukrainian ports will be regarded as the potential carriers of military cargo. So that's why the shots were fired, the vessel was stopped, and the captain has finally responded. We understand that the vessel was inspected and continued its way towards the Ukrainian port of Izmail. So from the Russian perspective, Russia has been doing everything in line with its promises and the statements that have been made before.
Thanks, Dasha. That is our correspondent, Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow.
Divisions have emerged in Austria and Switzerland over the two traditionally neutral countries declared their intent to join the European Air Defence Initiative, known as Sky Shield.
Major right-wing parties claim it would bring the two Alpine republics too close to NATO. Our correspondent Johannes Blechberger reports.
Aiming a 45mm gun at an airborne target. Air defense exercises have increased in Austria since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Senior military figures say the country is in desperate need of weapons.
We only have the capability to have short-range air defense, and what we are missing is the medium and long-range air defense. And what we are hoping now is, with Sky Shield, that we can close this gap within Austria.
Through Sky Shield, member countries want to coordinate the collective purchase of air defense systems and, most importantly, share radar information of the location and direction of hostile missiles. Switzerland and Austria, however, plan to join a light version of the program, where the decision on the military response remains in Bern and Vienna.
Despite the limited membership, many Austrians fear Sky Shield will compromise the country's long-held neutrality. Opinion polls show around half the population approves of the scheme.
I think it's always good to work together and not to think as alone.
For Austria, it's maybe better to have a defense, so it's quite okay. But if you are neutral and offensive, it's quite questionable.
I think that everyone should just sort themselves out and not look for other people to drag into their stuff.
We shouldn't be thinking about arms and, gearing up
Austria's far-right Freedom Party is calling for a referendum to stop the country joining the defense initiative. But the commander of Austria's Air Force says if neutral Switzerland can sign up to Sky Shield, then so can Austria.
We are not joining an alliance. This is an initiative launched by Germany, a nation-state which has invited us to participate in this air defence procurement process.
Apart from Austria and Switzerland, all other 17 participating countries are NATO members or applicants. A number of experts in Austria say joining Sky Shield will not compromise neutrality. The Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow disagrees, claiming that by joining the scheme, Vienna and Bern will be compelled to follow the West's common defense policy or face possible US and EU sanctions. Austria's government says it will invite military personnel to share all necessary information with opposition leaders in an attempt to convince the wider political spectrum and the wider public. Johannes Bleschberger, CGTN, Hollerbrunn, Austria.
Poland's Prime Minister says his government will hold a referendum on migration reform during upcoming parliamentary elections. Voters will be asked whether the country should take in, quote, thousands of illegal immigrants under proposed EU rules. Rivals say it's a political ploy to swing the outcome by misleading voters about opposition policies.
Beijing has confirmed that Denmark's foreign minister will make his first official visit to China later this week. Lars Løkke Rasmussen will meet his counterpart Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi with global security and environmental policies high on the agenda.
China's foreign ministry has strongly condemned a terrorist attack targeting Chinese engineers in Pakistan. The incident occurred near the southwestern port of Gwadar when the group's convoy was ambushed. 2 militants were killed and a separatist group in Pakistan claimed responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, Pakistan's ambassador to China has also condemned the act.
COVID infections and hospitalizations are on the rise in the US, Europe and Asia as a subvariant of Omicron known as Aries spread. The World Health Organization calls it the variant of interest, as it could be more contagious or severe. A new COVID vaccine tweaked to target Aries will be out in the US next month, but demand there for the jab has dropped sharply since 2021.
Europe's tallest and most active volcano has erupted, causing travel disruption. Italy's Mount Etna burst into action overnight, firing lava and ash high over the Mediterranean island of Sicily. The lava flow subsided before dawn, but all flights in and out of Catania have been grounded for several hours. Motorists have also been advised to take extra precautions with a large amount of ash on nearby roads.
One in 50 Londoners are homeless or housed in temporary accommodation. That's a claim from London Councils, a group that represents London's 32 borough councils.
The group says the situation is an unfolding disaster, and there have been a 110% rise in homeless families placed in temporary accommodation over the past year. Our correspondent Catherine Drew went to meet one family in this situation.
Piotr Rymbikovsk is doing his best to exercise the family dog near the budget hotel he currently calls home.
This is my mattress, my bed.
In April last year, Piotr was badly injured in an accident that left him unable to continue working as a carpenter. 4 months later, the family's home they had rented for 16 years burnt down. Piotr, his wife and 2 sons, aged 15 and 20, were placed in emergency accommodation.
Like here, we have not access to any fridge, any cooking facility, nothing at all, nothing, just the dry food. Just we have the shower here, shower, bed, and nothing else. Oh, it's hard time.
No permanent address has meant Piotr's physical therapy has been paused, and it's unclear where his 15-year-old son will go to school in September.
Local authorities use budget hotels such as this one for emergency accommodation across the UK. But the issue is particularly acute in London, where 170,000 people are housed in this way. Almost half of them are children, which equates to 1 child in every classroom.
Families should be moved from emergency accommodation within 6 weeks, but the Group London Council says there's been a near 800% rise in families exceeding that limit, at a cost of $76 million a month. Darren Rodwell, councillor for housing, says London boroughs face a total lack of other options for keeping a roof over these families' heads. He says homelessness pressures across London are fast becoming unmanageable and that the government needs to treat it as the emergency it clearly is. The British government says it's made funding available to local councils to deal with the issue, adding, "We have a strong track record of delivering affordable homes to rent and buy across the country through our $14.6 billion Affordable Homes programme. We have also announced $12.7 billion investment into housing supply and are on track to deliver our target of 1 million new homes this Parliament." Meanwhile, homeless charities say the number of people living on the streets increased nearly 10% between April and June.
We don't just deal with housing, we deal with need here, and we're talking about real need. We give them food bank vouchers, we give them clothing. You know, it makes me feel ashamed that our country, which is one of the richest countries in the world, aren't helping enough.
A year after becoming homeless, it's a sentiment Piotr agrees with as he waits for the council to rehome his family, fearing they've been forgotten.
I know there's some people in whatever Africa somewhere have worse situation, but we have in London, we have 21st century, you know, I mean.
Catherine Drew, CGTN, London.
Still to come. Will AI be planning your next getaway? A look at how artificial intelligence could be transforming the travel industry.
And could the British football transfer record be on the verge of being broken? Full story next.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So into the attention of world leaders.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
And in these mountains, they recently finished building a power plant.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. The average traveler spends at least 5 hours researching their holiday, with those in the US looking through more than 270 pages of content while planning a vacation. But all that could be about to change as the travel industry increasingly utilizes generative artificial intelligence. These are some of the major companies that have integrated AI into their platforms. TripAdvisor has launched an AI-powered itinerary maker, while Singapore-based Trip.com has a chatbot that responds to text and voice requests and provides links for booking. It's hoped in the future that, as well as planning itineraries, AI will communicate with hotels, draft the travel budgets, predict the flight delays, and eventually bring about personalization at scale. And all of that has got industry experts excited. It's predicted that chatbots alone could add almost $2 billion to travel sector, and that artificial intelligence can present an opportunity worth about $29 billion. But what do customers think? A recent survey found over 60% of respondents are open to using conversational AI to book trips, but there were some concerns, including protecting personal data and inaccurate results. Demetrios Bouhalis is Professor in Marketing Strategy and Innovation at Bournemouth University Business School. Professor, great to have you on the show. So first, how is generative AI going to make travel easier?
It will enable customers to be able to find better opportunities and better itineraries that will meet their own requirements, and it will satisfy their needs. Imagine that you've got a travel agent, a specialized travel agent at your disposal 24/7, and this travel agent is finding the best solutions for you constantly and is actually producing them in a way that it's easy to understand and easy to actualize.
And it has been used in many companies already, right?
Correct. It has been used around the world, and the more we learn how to use them, the more opportunities they'll be emerging in for the customers, and also the service that is operated will be great, because what's going to happen is that eventually organizations will be using generative AI to create new campaigns, to develop a range of different options and opportunities and products, and target the most appropriate customers.
And are we on the cusp of a tech revolution here? How is this going to affect travelers and travel services in general?
Well, people will be traveling in the way they've always traveled, but what is changing is the opportunity to identify the right products and services much faster, and to engage with the different elements of the industry so you can maximize the benefits for the customers. I think this is the opportunity that we've got, and we've got the opportunity that the machine is learning through machine learning constantly of what you are doing, so it will direct you to your own preferences much faster than you would have done in the past.
Well, Professor, as you said, this is more faster and efficient, but not everyone wants to deal with a bot. They want a real person. They just want to talk a real person about my future trips. So what do they have to take into consideration when it comes to incorporating generative AI into their strategies?
I don't think it's either or. I think what's going to happen is that people will be using generative AI faster and 24/7 in order to be able to reach ideas and to reach itineraries that they wouldn't be able to do in a normal kind of situation. And then and if the product and the service and what's required is fairly simple, AI will probably be able to do it immediately. But then when you have got complexity, when you have got to deal with empathy, and when you have to deal with the different elements of the opportunities that a human expert is going to give, then at this situation they'll be using travel agents, and they'll be using different experts.
Thank you. That is Professor Demetrios Bouhalis from Bournemouth University Business School.
Thank you very much.
Saudi Arabian football team Al Hilal have agreed a 2-year deal with Paris Saint-Germain for Brazilian player Neymar. PSG is set to receive around $98 million in the deal. Neymar will reportedly earn around $165 million a year. That's 6 times what he was earning at PSG. He became the world's most expensive player when PSG paid a world record-breaking $263 million for his transfer from Barcelona in 2017. Al Hilal had tried to sign Lionel Messi and Kylian Mbappe, but both players turned down the move. Meanwhile, the British transfer record is on the verge of being broken. Chelsea Football Club have agreed a $145 million deal to sign Moises Caicedo from Brighton. The Ecuador international, who will sign an 8-year contract, looked to be on the move to Liverpool, but he held out to join Premier League rivals Chelsea and has now completed a medical. The fee beats the $135 million that Chelsea paid Benfica for Enzo Fernandez in January.
Well, there will be a new game on the Women's World Cup trophy on Sunday. None of the 4 remaining sides have ever won the competition before.
In the first semi-final, Sweden and Spain meet in Auckland in front of a sellout crowd on Tuesday. For Spain, it's the furthest they've ever got in the competition, and they've emerged as favourites to win the trophy. Sweden last reached the final in 2003, and their players say they're just focusing on ensuring they perform their very best on the day.
I don't know which team that are the favourite in this game. I think we're both, when we're reaching semi-finals, I think there's only good teams, so I don't know about that, but I know that they have a great team and so do we.
Tomorrow's match is the result of thousands upon thousands of training sessions and moments that we've been through while we were away from our families. We've made a lot of sacrifices. We've had to sacrifice many things to be able to enjoy tomorrow's game. I'm not going to say it's a gift because I've worked a lot to be here. I've really worked hard and I want to enjoy the match, and I'm sure that the whole team will enjoy it. Everyone will enjoy it.
And the winners of that match will play either England or the co-hosts Australia in Sunday's final.
Australia's last 8th game against France went all the way to penalties, and the team focused on a light recovery among its training, including a gentle swimming session. There is great excitement in Australia about Wednesday's semi-final against England, with some cinemas and restaurants closing early and football teams cancelling practice to cheer on the Matildas instead.
Our headlines again. The US state of Georgia looks set to file charges against Donald Trump, including racketeering, conspiracy and false statements over his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election results.
Financial and protection and tax incentives for foreign companies in China as Beijing lays out plans to strengthen intellectual property rights and attract investment.
And at least 96 people are dead in Hawaii's worst natural disaster. The search efforts continue for hundreds missing in the historic town of Lahaina.
That is for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
There's more though on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
And you can go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live, but we'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all the team here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.